Hearing loss is a major condition globally. Around about 1.5 billion people experience hearing loss. And although the vast majority is related to age-related hearing loss, as you age, in fact, it's something like 33% of the population, if you're younger than 65, have some hearing loss already, but it's 84% when you get to over 80 years of age. So you can see a definite age-related factor in there. But the hearing loss actually begins many decades earlier. With the exception of single or repeated incidents, it begins very early. So people who experience very loud, sharp noises early on in life, in their teens even, will have a greater chance of having age-related hearing loss later. Now, the technical term for age-related hearing loss is, if you please forgive my pronunciation, presbycusis. And basically it's saying that as we age, we end up with some endothelial damage. That's the inner lining, the top outer lining of the inner ear area, which is damaged. You've got auditory hair cell damage. They're the little hair cells in the ears that actually generate the nerve impulses to send messages to the brain to tell us what we're learning and hearing. Mitochondrial dysfunction, which I talk about in every one of my videos because it is at the cornerstone of all damage and repair. So, and linked to all that is oxidation. Now, when it comes to age-related hearing loss or hearing loss in general, there is no doubt noise is the obvious one that stands out. Loud, sharp noises, hence you will go around and see people in noisy environments now are wearing their earmuffs, their hearing protection devices and so on, which is absolutely brilliant, and it wasn't that way when I was a lot younger. So you've got noise, you've got head trauma, and that means, by the way, if you're a teenager and like bang heavy doof music, or you like the headphones going really loud, don't, because when you get a little bit older, no, not even into your 70s and 80s, but in your 30s and 40s, you will start to have some of the negative repercussions with your hearing at that age. So you've got loud noises, head trauma, obviously, infections in the ear and around, but also gut infections are linked to it. So these are some of the preventable things that can be done. We also know, interestingly enough, the toxins, things like your heavy metals, cadmium and lead, have all been or both been linked with hearing loss. Microplastics and a couple of recent studies just in the last year have linked an increase in microplastics and otitis media ear infections in kids and teenagers, and linked with hearing loss as well. And VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. These are those gases that smell a lot. Everything from your hairspray right through to the chemicals that go into petrol, lacquers, varnishes and paints, and all those things have been linked with increasing risk of hearing loss. Now, given that we know that those chemicals affect the nervous system and your hearing is based around your whole nervous system, then you can understand it. But what most people don't realize is medications, quite a few medications, a couple of the top ones, for example, aspirin and ibuprofen, and things like antibiotics have all been linked with increasing hearing loss as you age. Now, one of the areas that most people aren't aware of, though, is the fact that diet and lifestyle is also implicated in hearing loss. And all you've got to do is look at the conditions that are associated with hearing loss. For example, obesity. Increased obesity leads to increased risk of hearing loss. Increased hypertension, high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, all of those increase your risk of hearing loss. So it's showing the underlying cause being inflammation and oxidation, which are linked with those conditions, and mitochondrial dysfunction. Even gout. If you are a regular sufferer of gout, first of all, I will tell you that we have a great video on how to fix gout, how to reverse it, how to make sure it doesn't come back. And all you got to do is read the testimonials in all of my YouTube videos, and the people will tell you these programs that I'm sharing with you now are incredibly effective. So check out the ones on gout. We've got it on weight gain, hypertension, heart disease, cholesterol as well. Coming back to it though, we know all these are linked. And if you have gout, you're at 2 to 3 times increased risk of hearing loss. So that's a 200 to 300% increased risk from gout. Now you say, how does that link with it all? Oxidation, inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, even osteoporosis, a lower bone mineral density is associated with hearing loss. And of course, cognitive decline. And then when you look at the gut, there is a strong link with the gut and hearing loss. If you have something, for example, called inflammatory bowel disease, then you have a dramatic increase in the risk of hearing loss as you age as well. So my message is to start working on all of these areas now, so that when you get a little bit older, or if you're already at that age, you start working on it so you doesn't go down any further, and as I said earlier, maybe even can reverse some of it. We'll see what happens with the research. But when we look at the diet side of it, there's dozens and dozens, hundreds in fact, of studies linking various aspects of diet with hearing loss. And there was a study of 71,000 women investigating the Mediterranean diet, and a Mediterranean diet, which is your nuts and seeds and veggies and fruit and all of those healthy food, olive oil and fish as the main protein source and so on, had a 33% decrease in hearing loss. In other words, they didn't have as much hearing loss, significantly, about 1/3 less hearing loss. Now that's great. So all we need to do is start looking at a Mediterranean diet. No, that's not lots of pasta and lots of pizza. That's an abomination of the Mediterranean diet. Another group of studies have demonstrated a high carbohydrate diet, to the point where a really extreme high carbohydrate diet, that's your breads, that's your cereals, your processed cereals, that's your sugars, that's your sweeteners, that's your soft drinks and all those things, led to an increased risk of hearing loss. Get that, an increased risk of hearing loss. So start getting off those processed carbohydrates now. Now, on the other side of it, and that was in old adults, in the other side, the studies also shown that fiber is protective. And I'm a big fan of fiber. Fiber is one of the key features of rebuilding the gut microbiome, and therefore having all these implications on so many other health impacts. And of course, my favorite fiber, which is by far the best fiber or prebiotic or gut health food, is K fiber, also known as phytobiome. So we've got all those. We've got saturated fat research on dozens of studies where they brought them together in what are called meta-analysis or reviews, have showed that saturated fat, increased saturated fat, leads to an increased risk of hearing loss. Whereas an increased use of monosaturated fats, for example, that's what you get in olive oil, in the nuts and the seeds, the omega-9, for example, decrease the risk of hearing loss. In a study of 5,202 participants, they found that increased nuts, seeds, fruit, seaweed, it was obviously, this study was done in Japan, seaweed led to an improving hearing. So the people who were consuming that diet had better hearing than the ones who were consuming the other these foods. And then to wrap it all up, to put it in some perspective and so on, a group of studies have demonstrated that ultra-processed foods, that's all your really highly processed packaged foods, they lead to a 2.8 times increase in risk in hearing. That's a 280% increased risk of hearing. So all of this confirms it, comes back to getting on a really well-balanced nutritional diet program. And in the meantime, that also reduces your risk of obesity, hypertension, heart disease, gout, osteoporosis, cognitive decline, and all those other gut issues, inflammatory bowel disease I mentioned earlier. So it's a really good win-win situation. And people say, well, what are the supplements? Look, I'm going to give you some information about the supplements, but the supplements are just that, only supplements when you're already having a good diet. And when we look at continuing looking at the big population-based studies, the epidemiological studies, they find that a high antioxidant diet led to decreased hearing loss. Now, these are all the antioxidants you're told about. The supplements, these are the ones you get in green tea. These are the ones you get in turmeric. These are the ones you get in all your curries. These are all the red, green, blue, purple colors that you get in all your natural foods that you can get as supplements, which are great, but even better when they come in your food. So a high antioxidant diet leads to a decreasing in hearing loss. And a high inflammatory diet leads to increasing hearing loss. Inflammation is the cornerstone, along with oxidation, and mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammation is the cornerstone of all of the diseases, including cancer, heart attack, strokes, diabetes, the biggest killers. So we can lower inflammation by having a high anti-inflammatory diet. That goes back to things like your fish oils, your vitamin C, all of your nutrients, many of them, right through to magnesium, for example, selenium and zinc, the minerals, are all antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. And then the high antioxidant and anti-inflammatory diet led to a 50% reduction in the age group 60 to 97. So when they looked at this age group 60 to 97, where most of the hearing loss is occurring, they found that the people who were having the highest antioxidant and the highest anti-inflammatory diet had a 50% reduction. That's a pretty good call to arms. By the way, they probably would have had a lower risk of obesity, hypertension, diabetes, etc., etc., etc. It's a win-win situation. And then we come to a big study done in 2025, a meta-analysis where they brought 33 different studies together, all looking at hearing loss and nutrients. And the ones that really stood out for them in the study, where they bring them together, they use all these fancy statistical packages to bring it together. So a decreased hearing loss was associated with vitamins B2, and you would have known that as riboflavin or vitamin B2. Beta carotene, which is the one you obviously get in carrots, and carotenoids, which is the group that beta carotene is combined in, but it was found also, that's all the reds, the yellows, the purples that you get in all your fruits. So right from carrots, tomatoes, what's called lipocene in tomatoes, the purple, the proanthocyanins, a whole raft of these carotenoids, the bright colors. And that's why you look for these bright colors. You have in the veggies, when you have some sweet potato, it's rich in these carotenoids, not just beta carotene. And then fiber, protein and fish were all associated with improved hearing and decreased hearing loss. And that's a pretty big study when they bring 33 studies together. And then when we look at some of the individual vitamins and minerals that have shown up, and again, dozens and dozens of these studies, and they've shown that you have improved hearing. So improved hearing with increased levels of vitamin C and vitamin A. I'm a big fan of vitamin C, supplementing with vitamin C. I get a lot in my normal diet that I eat, and I supplement with vitamin C, 3-4 grams a day. Now, I've also just done a series on iron where I show that if you want to increase your iron or increase lots of your nutrient intake, vitamin C helps along the way. So coming back here, riboflavin, which is again your B2, niacin, which is your B1, and then your minerals like magnesium. And magnesium is a potent anti-inflammatory mineral. It's associated with hundreds of enzyme reactions, biochemical reactions in your body going on every split second. You need it. And the general Western population is deficient in magnesium because you lose it in all the processed foods. Hence, going back to the ultra-processed foods, you don't get the vitamins and the minerals like magnesium. And so you need it to make sure you've got plenty of magnesium. Magnesium, by the way, one of the best ways to look at getting magnesium in your diet is green veggies. Anything green, that green is actually formed around literally molecules with magnesium in the middle of it. There you've got calcium and omega-3, all for improved hearing. So if you've got these, you're less likely to lose your hearing. And then we go on to deficiencies. When they've looked at large populations and they've found, okay, what don't they have? They find that people are generally deficient in vitamins A, B, C, D, and E, which all leads to worse hearing. So increased hearing loss, worse hearing. And they find that they're usually deficient in zinc, selenium, iron, iodine, and omega-3. All of these are the ones that the populations are deficient in. These ones are the ones that show when we've got higher levels of them, we have greater, better, improved hearing. So here is a kind of a cocktail of things that you can take away straight away. But with that in mind, there is so much more information available to help improve your hearing. The next question is, what happens when you use all this information from those big population studies to preclinical or clinical trials? Now, preclinical trials are what you're really talking about when you're testing on the rats and the mice and other animals, and the clinical trials are with humans. And one of the first ones was with resveratrol, which is what you get in your red wine. But of course, you only get a little bit of that and a lot of damage from the alcohol. So you need to take that as a supplement. You get it with grape skins, any of that purpley color that you get. I like it in the grape juice. And in this study with mice, they gave it to the mice while they were exposed to conditions which will contribute to hearing loss, e.g. extra noises and so on, and it decreased the noise-induced hearing loss, which is great because what it means is it's protective. It's stopping the damage being done, and of course, hopefully even helping repair, but we don't know that yet. In another study where they used melatonin at 10 milligrams a day, and this was on mice still, remember? And it delayed the age-related hearing loss and it improved mitochondrial function. So you had better hearing as a result of the melatonin. You know, melatonin is my favorite molecule. And despite what you hear out there that it's deadly and dangerous, it is fantastic. It is super safe, about the equivalent of vitamin C, ascorbic acid, okay? So it is really safe. And the only reason authorities don't promote it is because it would cut into the profits of pharmaceutical industries across the board. Watch my other videos on melatonin, you will see how good it is. And of course, I have no vested interest in that whatsoever. I'm just promoting good science. So we come back here and it delayed the age-related hearing loss and improved mitochondrial function, which is at the core of all these conditions, whether it's hearing loss, blindness, heart attack, strokes. So it's getting right into the core of where the damage is done or not. And it decreased oxidation and inflammation. Now, in another study that they did in humans, which relates to this, that's one of the population studies, that they actually found out that decreased blood melatonin levels, so decreased serum melatonin levels, you produce melatonin throughout your body. It's not just for sleep, it's in every one of your cells in the mitochondria where all the metabolism is being done. So it's in your blood at very low concentrations, and decreased blood melatonin concentrations were predictive of hearing loss. In other words, if you had really low melatonin levels in your blood, then you are more likely to have hearing loss. So you can see the link between melatonin, mitochondria, hearing loss, and so on. So quite clearly it's suggesting that a couple of things there can stop hearing loss right from the start. And then mice, on a 25-month study, they combined a few of these nutrients. And they combined vitamin E, vitamin C, melatonin, and they found out that two things that it did that really stood out was it decreased what's called the mitochondria DNA damage. Your mitochondria actually have DNA. By the way, that comes from your mother, the mitochondrial DNA, and that's the energy. Remember, the powerhouse that regulates your cells and all your energy in your body, so you can thank your mother for that one. And the mitochondria DNA, literally the damage from it decreased. So it's showing, and that would be generic around the body, that it would improve mitochondria throughout the body, but clearly up in the ears, because this was focusing on hearing, and it decreased hearing loss as a result of it. So again, being protective. And then when we looked at humans as adjunct to, or comparing it to this study, they found that mitochondrial DNA deletions, damage done to it, was something like greater than 8 times the age, led to an increase of 8 times the age-related hearing loss. Wow! So again, it's really, really showing the role of melatonin at this level and there, and the other vitamins, etc., and the role of the DNA deletions, the mitochondrial damage, in hearing loss. So we have to get back to the focus, to the grassroots of healing, the mitochondria. And then in a random controlled trial, so this is of humans, in 2022, 80 people, they gave them lion's mane mushroom. And in this study, which was very, very different in a sense, they gave them 2,000 milligrams per day, and it improved hearing and nerve growth factor, which is instrumental in throughout all of your nervous system, but clearly in hearing. And as you can imagine, nerve growth factor, NGF, and the NGF serum levels are representative of your healing, maintenance, repair in your, throughout your whole nervous system, but obviously in your ears. And so we have some benefits there, and that's showing that maybe it's even going to help repair damage that's being done. And of course, there aren't many experiments like this on humans, large scale, long-term studies that are being done. So it's a bit of a first for that matter, suggesting a possibility. And then when we get on to the future in this area, and we can see the gut is a big player, because there's what they now call the gut inner ear hearing loss. And while the studies are showing that your gut microbiome is definitely linked to hearing loss, so when you start to not hear as well, your gut microbiome is changing, and vice versa. So literally your gut microbiome is probably causing or linked to some of that hearing loss. Now, that's possible because of what's called the gut-brain axis, the gut nervous system axis, and your hearing runs on through your nervous system, but also through inflammation and oxidation that comes from your gut. So the inflammation in your gut has been linked to causing inflammation and damage to your hearing. So you can see that gut hearing loss axis in there. And then finally, one area that a lot of research on at the moment, and I'm going to be touching on that in another video, but is infrared. And you get these fantastic bands that go around your head that generate some infrared. And I actually have one of those and use it. I'll be talking about that on one of my other videos. And you can get little earplugs and so on. I don't know specifically those little earplugs are going to work, but the research on infrared is actually very positive in terms of preventing hearing loss, and maybe even improving hearing loss and tinnitus. So if you've got any of those conditions. Now, what this all means is that there is a future. Diet and lifestyle plays a big role in hearing. The first thing you have to do is obviously protection now. So reduce your exposure to loud, heavy, consistent noises. You know what it is. Headphones, earplugs, all of those things, great. Then in terms of what I've shown you today, it's about turning towards something like a Mediterranean rich diet, which is fruits, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, extra virgin olive oil, and in the fruit, of course, you've got lots of those carotenoids and beta carotene, which I mentioned earlier. It's got high anti-inflammatory food, and you can watch my other videos to find out what that means. Antioxidant foods. It's rich in nutrients, in particular the ones that have shown up for hearing. Vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, and minerals like magnesium, absolutely essential for the nervous system and many other functions around the body. Zinc and selenium. Omega-3s, that's the fish oils. Make sure you increase the doses of that. And your literally omega-9s, which are your monosaturated ones that you get in the nuts and the seeds and in extra virgin olive oil. Now, not to mention increasing your fiber, and from my perspective, the best fiber, without any doubt whatsoever, is K fiber. I will suggest that I have a vested interest. It's a 0.001% of the company. Yes, I'm a very, very minor shareholder in that one, but I bought in because K fiber is the best prebiotic to feed the gut in the world. And that's at least the latest title they've discovered from the science. Anyway, coming back, resveratrol, adding the resveratrol and other potent antioxidants will show up in the research in the future, ones like quercetin that you get in the onions and apples and so on. Melatonin is an absolute must. And the research on melatonin in across the board, all these other topics, I've got great videos on all of that. Melatonin and cancer, melatonin and cardiovascular disease. It is such a promising new future in all treatment of all these conditions. And of course, the big one, which was the one I just mentioned down here, is the lion's mane mushroom, using that. And of course, as I said, infrared and the gut. But the critical factor is implementing this into some program, adding it into your diet, taking certain processed foods out, getting rid of those ultra processed foods. Remember, we mentioned how bad they are for your hearing, getting rid of the sugary drinks, getting rid of the white bread, and putting in much more sustainable, healthier foods. Now, I've given you a great summary all about preventing hearing loss and maybe even generating some hearing, which as we age, and I'm on to my 69th now, and we want to make sure we protect our hearing. So here are some great steps. Watch my other videos, a lot on healthy aging, a lot on gut, and lots of other nutritional deficiencies like iron. I cover in depth for all those people who want to Age well, get well, stay healthy. Make sure you tick all the boxes, share this video with your friends, and let's get healthier together.